Yeah, I don't know if people are asking what my address is, and I look like a doing.
The August 16th meeting of the Eden Prairie City Council will now come to order. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to the start of each council meeting, we have a half hour that is set aside as open podium, which is an opportunity for Eden Prairie residents to address the council on issues related to Eden Prairie city government. This portion of the meeting is from approximately 6:30 to 6:55, and our meetings are generally the first and third Tuesdays of each month. If you wish to speak at that time, please contact the city manager's office at 949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, your phone number, and the subject matter you wish to discuss. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are concluded, we will open up the floor to unscheduled speakers. This portion of the meeting is not recorded or televised. Again, if you have any questions on this, please contact the city manager's office. The first item tonight is an acceptance of a donation from Grand Haven at Marsh Cove Homeowners Association for nature trail improvements. Mr. Lotthammer.
Yes, Your Honor, council members. This homeowners association approached us. We do have quite the network in the Edenvale conservation area of nature trails, and this has been a planned connection coming out of the kind of the back end of the homeowners association north of Duck Lake Trail. And they approached us to help with the funding. We do have additional funding to complete this section of this, so this will aid us in doing that. Plan to do some of the work this fall, but potentially move into next spring. But it's an opportunity to partner with them, and we are grateful for their funding contribution.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Is there a representative from the group here today?
Not tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would move to adopt the resolution accepting the donation of $8,500 from Grand Haven at Marsh Cove Homeowners Association for nature trail improvements.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. The next item is the acceptance of a donation from Christopher Sternthal towards the Veterans Memorial.
Yes, you've been hearing and reading quite a bit of Pokemon Go. And Mr. Sternthal is someone who is a participant in that, Eden Prairie graduate and resident, and wanted to come forward as someone who communicates within the Minnesota Pokemon Go community to hopefully help us communicate and get the word out for encouraging people to be respectful of that site. And so we appreciated his time to help educate us, but then at the end he wanted to leave us with a contribution towards the Veterans Memorial. So that's what that exists of tonight. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. Is there an motion?
Move to adopt the resolution accepting the donation of $200 from Christopher Strenthal towards the Veterans Memorial.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. Is that towards maintenance, continued maintenance of the...
Yeah, so we have a fund that's dedicated towards that, and the fund gets used over time and likely as we go into the future, and it needs some more significant maintenance, but it does both help for both some of the engraving or the general cleanup that it needs to the memorial itself, to the granite parts of the memorial.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
I think it's been just great with all the people who are with the Pokemon Go who are suddenly out in the parks all over. It's nice to see people just out there using it. And it's, there's a lot in and around the Veterans Memorial and Purgatory Creek, but I see it in all sorts of other parks. And I think it's absolutely great.
All right, the next item is acceptance of a donation from Team Fox Jets towards the Aquatic Center addition.
Yes, I think we all remember and acknowledge that Team Fox Jets has been an important part both in the planning portion of the new Aquatic Center, but also in assisting in funding it, and are certainly a major user of that facility. And so as they had pledged early on, to work to raise funds, help with some of the naming rights. They've continued to do that. They continue to work hard and hold, whether it's events or efforts, to try to reach out to some more businesses and individuals. And tonight, I think you'll see the fruits of that with the donation of $82,000. We've got Brandon Thornton with us tonight representing the Fox Jets, and he has been lately the person that's spearheading those fundraising efforts with the committee. But it's been a pleasure working with him and continuing to try to help them in some of their fundraising efforts. So let Brandon speak.
Thanks again for your support of the Aquatic Center. It's a fantastic facility for this community and for Team Foxjet. Our latest installment is a result of our continued efforts, and we are continuing to make efforts, as Mr. Lotheimer mentioned, to achieve our goal. Just a couple of quick notes. We recently held the Minnesota Achievement Championships meet at the Aquatic Center. This would have been July, and we got very, very, very positive feedback from all of the families throughout southwestern Minnesota that were able to attend that meet. These people, some of them stayed in our city's hotels and patronized our city's restaurants and businesses. So it's a great facility for us to be able to host meets and bring people in for that, as well as every time I go in the morning and swim, it's a very busy place. So we're excited to be able to continue to contribute to that, and once again thank the city for making that facility available.
Well, and thanks to Fox Jets for this additional $82,000. I imagine the parents that were involved with Fox Jets prior to the addition are just overwhelmed by how much easier it is to move around that space when you do have a meet.
It is a world of difference.
Yeah. Have you noticed any effect that it's had on membership with Fox Jets? Not that you have a whole lot of space to fill. I mean, you don't want to create another problem of not having enough lane space, but is it having a positive recruiting impact?
Well, our membership has increased by 10% in the last year, which is a very immediate effect.
And this is an Olympic year, so
and so this year, go Team USA. Hopefully, we'll see another 20% increase this year. But yes, it absolutely has made a difference.
Well, the boys' high school team, they ranked number 2 in the nation, weren't they?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wasn't aware of that, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming out here tonight for this. Is there a motion?
I would move to adopt the resolution accepting the donation of $82,000 from Team Fox Jets toward the Aquatic Center addition.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda and other items of business?
Move approval.
Second.
Any items to take out or additions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the council workshop held Tuesday, July 19th, 2016?
Move approval.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Any items to correct? All in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the city council meeting held that same date?
Move approval.
Second.
Any items to correct there? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent calendar, A through O. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Any items to question?
Mayor, just a quick comment. You have a letter on your desk that just accompanies one of the items from Liberty Property Trust that we just want to have in the record for your approval for the second reading of the TOD ordinance. And then I do note that you are approving items A through O. There is no P.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
It says P in the
It
agenda.
says P in the annotated,
I see.
but
Okay.
it's A through O.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. All right. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. First public hearing is a vacating of an easement. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You know, on many occasions you have projects that come before you where drainage and utility easements need to change or be adjusted, and you would vacate an easement in almost every situation. that's also predicated on the approval of a newer easement. In this case, we're talking about vacating drainage and utility easements in the newer Belle Reeve development you might be aware of near Riverview Road. And there is a combination of lots, an administrative combination of lots that is occurring. And through the landscaping and the driveway construction and what's happening with that lot, that affects the existing drainage and utility easements there that we would relocate or change or alter. So the action after the public hearing would be to vacate those existing easements, and then there would be approval at a future date, after the lot combination occurs, that it would take place after that last paragraph. It's predicated on the lot combination being approved.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the audience that wants to address the council on this easement? Okay, are there any questions for staff?
No.
So I would move to close the public hearing and adopt the resolution vacating the public drainage and utility easements lying over, under, and across. A lot of prepositions there. That part of lots 6 and 7, Block 1, Belle Reeve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is the first reading of an ordinance amending City Code Chapter 11 to add schools as a permitted use in the public zoning district.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Notice of this public hearing was in the August 4th edition of the Eden Prairie News. Bringing back a little bit of history, prior to 2011 or in 2009, 2010, we updated the city code. You may actually recall this was somewhat predicated on the 9 Mile Watershed District offices potentially going into a residential area. So just give you a little background to the updating of the code. And so at that time, what you did, well, prior to that, public facilities were a permitted use in every zoning district. And what you did was to eliminate the term public facilities and put in public infrastructure. And the feeling at that time was if somebody wanted to have a publicly operated improvement, that they would go through the process with the Plan Commission and Council to get rezoning or proper zoning to have a public use, and not just allow public uses in all zoning districts. So you made that text amendment. At that time, what that did do was create a non-conforming issue for our schools. Actually, it's not at least a few of the schools are zoned public, but in the text amendment in the zoning ordinance, it would create a non-conforming use for all of them. So really, this action is to correct that and to put in place the terminology of the new school use. And then if the code amendment is approved, it would bring several of the school properties that are already zoned public into conforming status. Then the action that you're going to need to take at the next council meeting, which the Plan Commission took at their last council meeting, was to then take action to rezone the remaining properties public. So then all of those school properties would be zoned public. But we need this code amendment to bring those current schools that are publicly zoned into compliance. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the text amendment at their July 11th meeting. And then once again, you need a public hearing. This would be the first reading of the ordinance. The second reading would take place on September 6th. That would be the same night you would take action on potentially rezoning some of those other school sites.
Okay. Questions for staff? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the audience that wants to address the council on this rezoning?
Seeing none, I move to close the public hearing and approve the first reading of an ordinance amending City Code Sections 11.02 and 11.35 to define and add schools as a permitted use in the public zoning district.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. Payment of claims. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any items for questioning? Okay, roll call, please.
Okay. Councilmember Aho?
Aye.
Councilmember Butcher Wickstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Case,
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson,
Aye.
and Mayor Nancy Tyler-Lukens.
Aye. The next item is the awarding of a contract for the construction of Cedar Hills Park. Mr. Lotthammer.
Your Honor, council members, before we get into the action items tonight, I'd like to give you a brief history of Cedar Hills Park and how it came about. Really contemplated back in the early 2000s. 2003, it became a part of the final agreement with MAC. And so if you go into that agreement, you'll see it referred to as the Husted-Atkins property. And part of that agreement, although it is technically MAC property, was for us as a city to use that forever as park property. So it is a use agreement which is different than our relationship with MAC on the other properties. We lease land from MAC for Flying Cloud Fields, for the Flying Cloud Gardens. In this case, it is a use agreement at no cost to us, so we won't be making payments on it. It was, again, part of the negotiated final agreement. So that goes back to 2003. It's taken some time to get from 2003 to where we are now, and some of that was a part of going through some of the FAA approvals for MAC before they could actually sign that agreement. But within the last year and a half, we were able to do that and then really move forward. Before we spent any of our planning dollars for doing designs, we wanted to make sure that we had a signed agreement for going forward with that property. And so that was achieved. We then held neighborhood meetings. We had since 2002 a conceptual design, because that was required as part of the final agreement that a conceptual design be put into place. So that had been in attachment to the final agreement, which really showed a small portion of the park being used as a neighborhood park. That's been called for a long time our last neighborhood park. Time will tell if that truly turns out to be, but at this point in time, we don't have any further plans to add additional neighborhood parks. When you think about all of the development that's happened around there, especially recently, Hennepin Village A and B and all of the other new home developments in that area, that's really an area, if you have kids or are a kid on a bike, there really isn't any place to go to play at a park. And so this achieves that. It's a 30-acre site. I'm going to point out a few things. I've got a document here for the document cam, if we can zoom in just a little bit. But this is the outline of the park. Again, 30 acres. Eden Prairie Road on the east side, Shetland Road on the west side. And what this flat piece of paper certainly doesn't do a good job of showing is the topography that exists at this park and the amount of trees and natural area. Basically, if it's white on the piece of paper, it is covered with trees. And so what we're showing is down in this south area of the park, a parking lot and a open field with a small backstop. So you could see kids pitching to each other, playing games of kickball. There's a small area with a play structure and play features, and then there is a basketball court, hard court surface. We, through our discussions with both the Parks Commission and also with the Conservation Commission and Historic Preservation Commission, wanted to make sure that we respected the natural land that's down here. The creek flows through. Also, there's some significant wetlands that we are making sure that we have a good buffer from. You will notice this hard surface trail that really takes you from the neighborhoods up into the west, gets you down so you wouldn't have to go out onto Pioneer Trail and come down Eden Prairie Road. So we think that's a significant connection as well. When you think about where it's located in our community, and part of working with the commissions was to identify a theme. And we're really close to the river corridor. And we're also close to areas where some of the first settlers and pioneers in Eden Prairie, as well as some of the Native American encampments were. The feedback that we received from the State Historic Preservation Commission was to focus more towards the pioneer side of Eden Prairie. So this has some good potential interpretive signs, both from a history standpoint, but also from an ecological standpoint of the wetlands, the forests that are there. We do have plans for the future to put nature trails in so people can enjoy the more natural area with some benches, but really the only active part is in that southern area. I've got a couple renderings of the theming of the play structure. First one shows you a little bit of kind of the pioneer theme to it, and this looks a little bigger on paper than what it actually is. It's only about 14 feet high total with that facade, but it really, we think, interprets what the pioneer theme in the area. And then the second one that I'll show you too, you can see in the younger kids play area, this slide is actually a stagecoach in theme. You'll also notice mainly browns, greens, and tans, so that as you're driving by on Eden Prairie Road, hopefully it more blends into the natural background as well, so trying to take that into consideration. We have 3 action items in a row for you to consider tonight, and they really cascade from one to the next. If you approve the first one, which is to accept the bids for the construction of the park, the next one is with HTPO, who did the design work, who would also do our construction observation and testing, which is a role that they typically play for us. And then the third one is entering into an agreement with the watershed district to be able to maintain some of our ponds, wetland buffers, and also the stream flow of the creek. So they really come separately as motions, but they all are related to each other. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lothhammer? I guess not. Thanks.
I just have a quick question. In terms of the amount of trees that you have to remove to accomplish this, what are you talking in terms of numbers or caliber inches or however you want to make a measurement of that?
Yeah, you will see a couple. I wouldn't call them our larger trees, but in the area where the open field is, we do have some trees, and it's. Some of them are pretty small and tight, but there's a couple larger ones. But because we're doing this kind of near the wetland area and working back from that, we've got a good buffer between us and the wetland. But I don't have an exact number of trees, but in that 2-acre area, there will be some area that needs to have trees removed, graded so we can have the parking lot, have the flat play area, and also the open grass field.
Good, thank you.
Councilmember Wickstrom?
Yes, hi. Mr. Lothhammer. Sorry. I have a question. I am wondering if you could tell us something about the contractor that you're looking at to do this. I think the concepts are so perfect for Eden Prairie, and I really love the idea of having it fit in with its environment. This is exactly what I think we should be doing with our parks, all of them. But anyway, can you tell us a little bit about them? I'm wondering if this was a company that Ron and I had met when we were at the National League of Cities.
You know, on the play equipment, potentially. We're looking at landscape structures as a potential. They would be the vendor. The contractor that's doing the work, the general contractor, Minger, we have not used them in one of our parks, but HTPO, the engineering and design firm, has used them several times and has had good experience. We typically don't bid parks at this time of year, but the way that this worked out with getting some of our watershed approvals, it kind of pushed us into this time. We typically would say our better times for bidding is January and February when people are lining up projects. What we did to hopefully mitigate that was part of construction can start this year, and the rest of it, the finishing, will be next year. So we actually had 9 companies bid on this, which is more than what we've been having even when we do in January and February. So I think it was pretty attractive to some companies that are finishing up some of this year's projects, want to get a little bit of a start, and then know that they have something on the books for next year. So our background checks and just the reference from HTPO makes us comfortable with Minger as there will be, they'll be moving some soil around and some, building of the bridges and the asphalt path as well. So they're as much of a grading contractor as well as kind of that finishing contractor, and then they'll be subbing out the construction of the play features.
And so for the themes, you said it was play structures? What did you call the company?
Landscape Structures.
Landscape Structures. They're a Minnesota-based company, aren't they?
Of Delano.
Yeah. They've got a very good reputation.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to award the contract for Cedar Hills Park Development to Minger Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $892,992.50.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. The next item is a professional service agreement with HTPO for construction. Did you want to say anything more on that, or you'd kind of introduced all these issues?
Yeah, not unless you have other questions, but this is for
Okay.
the construction management and oversight of the project.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does anybody have any question? Okay, motion, please.
Move to authorize entering into a standard agreement for professional services with HTPO for construction phase services for Cedar Hills Park development at a cost not to exceed $98,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. The final item here is approving the maintenance agreement with Riley Purgatory Creek Watershed District for Cedar Hills Park. Any questions?
No questions. I move to authorize entering into a maintenance agreement for buffer areas, water crossing, and stormwater facilities at Cedar Hills Park with Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Lathammer, did you say that this is something new that the Watershed District is requiring? I don't recall ever.
Yeah, about the last year, part of their new rules have been for us to enter into those agreements that contractually obligate us to do maintenance on our storm ponds or other features that they have as a part of their oversight and approval for development plans. And so we're working on a master agreement. We have had a few of these on an individual project-by-project basis, but hopefully in the future we'll do one master agreement and then they'll be added as individual ones go. So.
All right. Thank you. Did we have a motion in a second? We did, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. The motion passes. Finally, we have a report from our fire chief about recreational fires. We've gotten a few emails about recreational fires, and we had it out on City Connect, I believe, to get feedback from our residents on their feelings about recreational fires. But you'll have a lot more information for us, I'm sure.
Lots, yeah. So, Your Honor and council members, we did some research with actually cities statewide, fire marshals statewide, to gather some data on kind of comparing our rules and regulations and our ordinance regarding rec fires and sort of what's out there, so you can sort of see how ours compares and take that under advisement.
Okay.
So I'll just walk you through this quickly. First of all, the current guidelines for the city of Eden Prairie are that you have to have your fire at least 25 feet from structures or any kind of combustibles, so like your home, shrubs, etc. And then you have to have a means of extinguishment, bucket of sand, shovel, garden hose, something. The size of the fire can't be more than 3 by 3 by 3, so kind of imagine a 3 foot by 3 foot cube. And it has to be constantly monitored, and it's something that you would hopefully have people sitting around the campfire kind of thing. It's not a way to get rid of yard waste. We have a location exception for portable screened, these portable fireplaces that you see here, and currently our ordinance just reads that it has to be kept a safe distance from the structure, and it needs to be on some sort of hard pavement or bare ground. Permissible times, 7 a.m. to midnight. You can have your fires when the fire danger is at or below what the DNR calls high, and I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but in their world, high is kind of the medium, because it goes from low, moderate, high, very high, and then extreme. So that's their rating system, and we just picked the middle one, which, so far we haven't had any problems, and we've had this ordinance in place for many years. And then the wind has to be less than 15 miles an hour. And the basic reason for that is that fire tends to like to travel on the ground, unlike what you see in the media, which is they usually show fires crowning across trees. Fire really prefers to travel on the ground, so keeping it below 15 miles an hour and below, and at higher below, keeps that flame spread low. And so here's the state fire code. Again, you can see we're in compliance with it in terms of the 25 feet from the structures. We differ a little bit on the portable outdoor fireplaces in that we talk about a safe distance. The state fire code talks about 15 feet, so they're a little more prescriptive than we are. You have to always, just like ours, we talk about constantly attended. So we don't want to show up at one of these if we get a call from a neighbor, and that's usually it's on a complaint basis, how it goes, and find nobody around. They need to be constantly monitoring it. Our requirement also is that you print out our little requirement sheet and somebody has that with them, which explains all these guidelines. So we sent the survey out. We got responses from 78 different cities. We kind of lumped them into two categories, sort of your more greater Minnesota cities and then the metro area. And I'll show you the results within those two categories. So do you have city guidelines for recreational fires? 100% of the metro cities that responded said yes. So having some sort of guidelines is not unusual. It's, in fact, very common. And greater Minnesota tracks pretty consistently with that as well. Do you require a permit for recreational fires? Again, we don't have a permit. We just have guidelines that you print out. So that's kind of a subtle difference. Most cities are like ours and don't require a permit in the metro area. And of course, a huge bunch of them don't require it in the greater either. Is there a permit fee? We can only find two that responded to the survey that do have a fee. They're pretty nominal. We just haven't gotten into the fee business in this because we don't really go out and do anything. So, and then if there's going to be an inspection to go along with the fee, just again, a couple of cities do it. Pine City has a one-time sort of by homeowner occupancy inspection, and Lawn Lake apparently does it annually. I'm not sure exactly what their compliance level is with that, but I guess for people that sign up for it, they can get one. Permissible hours, I think this is something that's, for the few people that have opinions about rec fires, the permissible hours thing comes up, and that's split about 50-50. When you look at the people that do have hours, our 7 a.m. to midnight is pretty normal. Some go later into the overnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Some might start at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Some start at 6 a.m. But, 7 is not an outlier, and our midnight is not really an outlier either. And, again, the spacing, that's pretty much down the line on the state fire code with the 25 feet rule that you saw earlier, or the 15. And then burning materials, again, in the metro, that's very, very common. And typically what that is it's prescribing a minimum size that you can burn so that you're not having people burning grass and leaves and twigs. It's got to be, again, sort of a recreational fire, something that you'd expect people to be sitting around and making s'mores or, doing that kind of thing, and not just using it to burn yard waste or painted lumber or, any of those kinds of things.
So how do we specify that?
I think the minimum is 3-inch diameter.
You say that?
Yep. Okay. And then we say specifically no grass or leaves or yard waste, no painted woods. It has to be bare wood.
Do we talk anything about greenwood? I mean, if you were burning a 3-inch branch of a freshly cut spruce tree or something, you would get massive gray smoke. We don't specify anything about that would limit that?
Well, typically the smoke from that would be due to the fine needles that are coming off it. And again, we're talking about that 3-inch diameter, so really the fine branches wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through the gray here that I understand that completely,
Yeah.
But every 3-inch piece of wood has sticks coming out of it, and so would, someone could have a 3-inch piece of pine, but it was fresh and had the needles coming out.
So if we got a complaint basis, and that's really what drives our response to these things, either with fire or law enforcement, or typically together, we always like to show up with our friends in law enforcement to calls, and they had a big pile of branches that had all those little tributary branches off of them. We would tell them that they'd have to trim those off and just get down to the 3-inch.
Got it.
Again, those are, reported complaint-based kinds of things. Maximum fire size, again, in the metro area, 100% are yes. That's very, very, very common. So that's kind of how ours sizes up against everyone else's. In summary, I'd say ours is right in line with what everybody else is doing. We really don't get a lot of complaints when you think about all the other things that we're engaged in on a daily basis. I would say complaints about wreck fires is pretty minimal.
So, Mr. Espenson, we don't permit, so you said that what we do instead is we have these guidelines that we ask people to print out, but how do they know that we've got those guidelines online?
Well, if they come to our website and type in recreational fire, it'll take them right to the permit, right to the guidelines, and then they very specifically say you must have a printed copy of this when you're conducting a recreational
How
fire.
often do you get calls that you have to go out and enforce our rules?
Typically in the fall when people are burning leaves. Neighbors are burning leaves, and they're using their rec fire as a leaf burning thing, and those can get pretty smoky, and so then that's when we get called. But I would say it's more of a spring and fall kind of thing. Sometimes when the air is really heavy, like last night, if someone were to have a rec fire and it's smoldering and they've gone inside for the night and left this smoldering kind of thing, we would get called. But I'd say less than 20 calls a year. I mean, it's a really small percentage of our calls.
Oh, okay.
So.
Some of the complaints that we've gotten about rec fires have been, I think, as much to do with frequency as anything else. Do any of these cities have regulations on how frequently you can have a rec fire?
No.
Okay.
And virtually all of them talk about if it becomes a serious nuisance, then we have the ability to tell people that they can't have that fire at that time. A lot of the complaints that we get, people they've called out of frustration 2 or 3 days later, but they don't call
At the time.
at the time. And we always encourage them, use our 911 center. We'll be happy to respond out there and, educate people.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much for that report. Appreciate it, all the research you did. Thanks.
No problem. It's not me, it's my Cracker Jack staff. So.
Your Cracker Jack stuff, okay.
They just set me up, so.
All right. There's no action required on that item. It was just a report. Is there a motion to adjourn the council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.